Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway, where teachers can save 5% every day. Download the Safeway app and verify your teacher status for exclusive offers and discounts. Get started at Safeway.com or in the Safeway app.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
In Mexico, where I grew up, this day, April 30th, is El Día del Niño, or Children's Day.
You know, Arlo, as a parent, that kind of sounds like every day in my house.
I'm sure it feels that way.
So what is it that makes El Día del Niño special?
Yeah, so it's this one day that you're actually encouraged to be a kid. And the schools would turn into almost like a carnival, with full of games, live music, prizes, and a ton of candy.
I get it. That does sound like fun for kids. And of course, Mother's Day is just around the corner, which is when it's our turn to get the candy.
Yes, extra candy, of course. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel.
And I'm Bazi Kanani. Coming up, the season of wild swings in the weather.
And all of that due to an unstable atmosphere.
Then, what we're learning about Trump's plans to punish Denver.
It means that that's $24 million that the city worked to procure for a crisis that it did not create.
Also,
measles is contagious, and it's here. It's not just coming, it's here.
What it means for people who do have the measles vaccine. And a chance to see new shows debut this week in Colorado, including a love story about pickleball.
It is Wednesday, April 30th. Here's the news in Colorado today.
As we close the book on April today, we're starting a new season in Colorado.
Typically May, June, July into August, and then our severe weather season typically peaks in June. That's when we see some of the strongest storms.
May is typically the start of severe weather season. We checked in with Denver 7 Chief Meteorologist Lisa Hidalgo about what she expects to see, starting with showers tonight. Then?
Right now it looks like next couple of weeks it's going to be wetter than normal.
That precipitation would be welcome because the winter was relatively warm and dry. Less snowpack, melting faster, means less water will be available throughout the year in cities across Colorado and the southwestern U.S.
When you look at our recent snowpack numbers, parts of southern Colorado, drought conditions are worsening there.
There's also the impact on fire season.
And the 3-month outlook right now for us, May, June, July, is warmer than normal and drier than normal. So that worries me a bit. But let's hope for the best.
You can hear the full conversation with Lisa in the Colorado Matters podcast. We are getting a clearer picture and timeline for the Trump administration's plans to punish Denver 100 days into his presidency. The city has already lost some money and will likely be a target of a new order regarding sanctuary cities. Denverite editor Andrew Kenney joins us. Andy, there's been lots of threats and speculations, and actually the city has already lost some federal funding. Mm-hmm. How much was it and what was it for?
Denver has lost a few grants, but the biggest by far was worth $24 million, maybe even more. This was money the city had already spent, actually, on its response to the arrival of tens of thousands of immigrants. This was in 2023 and 2024. A lot of that money was spent on emergency shelters so people weren't living on the streets. And the city at that time basically got an IOU from the Biden administration that the feds were going to pay this money back at some point. Now, these things can take time, so the city was kind of expecting it to come eventually. But this month, FEMA, under President Donald Trump, said, you know what, we're not actually going to pay that money to you.
And what reason did FEMA give for pulling the funding?
Bazi, it wasn't very complicated. This program supports immigrants who may not have legal status, and therefore it's not aligned with the priorities of the Trump administration. They said they're allowed to do that based on the law. The city, for its part, they said, well, look, we followed these rules. These immigrants were largely paroled into the country by Border Patrol. A lot of them were bused here by the state of Texas. They were living on the streets. It was turning into like a humanitarian crisis. And the city says it did its part to respond to this national crisis, and it was really counting on this money that was essentially promised to it. I talked to John Ewing, a spokesperson for Denver's mayor, about this.
It means that that's $24 million that the city worked to procure for a crisis that it did not create, that it will not be getting.
$24 million. What impact will that have on Denver's budget?
The city really wasn't counting on getting this money today, tomorrow, or next week. As I mentioned, these federal grants, they come really slowly. Sometimes it can take years. But overall, Denver could have used that money because right now the budget is pretty tight. So knowing this $24 million is not going to be coming, that actually adds to the pressure on the city budget, which is going to be, again, in a tough spot for maybe a few years to come.
Speaking of adding to the pressure, President Trump signed a new executive order this week telling federal agencies to make a list of sanctuary cities and states. Do you expect Denver will indeed be on that list?
It's a pretty good bet. And I say that mostly because Republicans have said again and again that they think Denver is a sanctuary city. When powerful Republicans in Congress made 4 different city mayors from around the country come testify about these so-called sanctuary policies in Washington, D.C., Mayor Mike Johnston was in there. They brought him up alongside like the mayor of New York City and Boston, these much larger cities. Denver has got this administration's attention.
I just asked you what, so you don't consider yourself a sanctuary city?
We provide services and supports.
Do you consider yourself a sanctuary city? That's
we do not under that definition.
You don't use the definition, you're not a sanctuary.
We call ourselves a welcoming city.
Okay, so what are you welcoming?
I want to add that sanctuary is a subjective term. City leaders usually say, no, we're not like shielding anybody from getting arrested. But the fact is that city and state laws do limit how these authorities cooperate with immigration agents. And the city and state do have benefits for immigrants, regardless of their legal status. Those are benefits that you won't find in Republican states. So it's eye of the beholder, but clearly Republicans and the Trump administration seem to define Denver as being in this group of sanctuary jurisdictions.
Any idea what that could mean for Denver and for Colorado if it does end up on this list?
It means a sustained campaign to do more of what we just saw, more of trying to cut off funding, more of trying to pressure the city to change its policies. Colorado gets between $100 and $200 million of federal money per year, so a lot of money at play.
And that is a significant amount.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of the city budget. Trump hasn't really said exactly what kind of federal money will be targeted, but the list could include everything from, emergency response money like we've been talking about to funding for housing and infrastructure projects. I'll add, this is the 3rd time Trump has tried to issue this kind of anti-sanctuary order. Those earlier efforts, they were blocked by judges or faced legal challenges. This new one will probably go to court as well. There will probably be a nationwide legal battle over exactly what the Trump administration can and can't do to cities like Denver.
We'll be watching, and we know you'll be following this over at Denverite. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
The latest measles case in Colorado was contracted by someone who is vaccinated. Nearly 900 people nationwide have measles. Most of those cases are in Texas, with only 5 here in Colorado. However, the appearance of measles in a handful of people who are vaccinated, in Colorado and beyond, raises new questions. I interviewed Daniel Pastula, who studies infectious diseases at the University of Colorado Anschutz. I asked him, does the fact that someone who's vaccinated get it mean that the shot doesn't work?
So it doesn't mean it wasn't working. So measles is a virus. It's one of the most contagious viruses or contagious infectious disease that we know of. One person who's infected with measles, essentially if they expose other people, can give it to somewhere between 12 and 20 people who are unvaccinated.
Oh, wow.
Right? So the vaccine is, we think, is 97% effective.
So does that mean that if you walked into a classroom with 100 vaccinated kids, 3 of them would still get infected?
What we mean by that is that 97 people who are fully vaccinated who get exposed to measles won't have any symptoms whatsoever, whereas 3 may have symptoms, but it doesn't mean they have the full-blown case of measles like an unvaccinated person would.
And what does that look like?
So measles typically starts with kind of fatigue, high fever. Shortly after that, people start having spots, red spots on their face and on the inside of their mouth. They can also get spots on the inside of the mouth. If all it did was cause a fever, cough, and spots, it would not be ideal, but we wouldn't be nearly as worried. However, 1 in 5 people who develop measles will become hospitalized. So essentially, there's so much risk with like a florid measles case in people who are unvaccinated. And we have such a safe and effective vaccine that essentially eliminates that risk while training your immune system to recognize it.
It's known that the vaccine was 97% effective. For the longest time, in the 2000s, we recognized it as eradicated. Then in 2014, something changed. We started seeing more and more cases. So what exactly is going on?
So there's been waning vaccination coverage, particularly in children. As I mentioned, measles is incredibly contagious. It is always going to be imported, into the United States by travelers. And you need something called herd immunity. We need about 95% of the population vaccinated to prevent measles from spreading. Decades ago, we used to see like 95% or more coverage for the measles vaccine. And that's dropped. And not dropped uniformly, but that's dropped into, the low 90s or even high 80s or low 80s.
Well, let's dig into those numbers a little bit. According to the CDC numbers, there has been a decreasing trend of vaccinations, culminating with last year, where only 92% of kids were vaccinated. And in Colorado, it was even lower, less than 90% vaccinations. So that is well below the immunity threshold that you just mentioned. Why have we not seen the rates that we are seeing in Colorado as compared to places like Texas?
Part of the reason we're not seeing as many cases is overall our community vaccination rate is higher in many parts of Colorado. But it's a patchwork, right? It's not all the communities. That's why we keep seeing cases pop up. And again, in the right circumstance, an outbreak may catch on.
Daniel Pastula, thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
You can meet your partner in many different ways. Online, at a coffee shop, or when your hands lightly touch while reaching for the handle in the light rail. But if you happen to meet during a pickleball match, you might be destined for the screen.
But we're going to be holding auditions, or basically we're just going to have a little camera there where you can tell us your How I Met My Partner story through pickleball, and we're essentially casting for season 2.
That is Greg Stouffer, whose show How I Met My Partner premieres at the Denver Film C Center this week. This is part of SeriesFest, a festival celebrating the art of independent TV creation. Why pickleball, you ask? Well, according to Stouffer, pickleball is a window into someone's real self.
When you play pickleball with someone, you get to know who they really are. So a lot of times, if you're just chatting someone on an online dating app or even, through email, they can be whoever they want to be. But when you're on a court and you're on a pressure situation and they hit a ball in the net and they're frustrated or they're angry, that's when their true colors come out. So it's actually a really efficient way to sift through the dating application.
Stouffer took that conviction to Pickle TV. Yes, that is a real channel, and they liked the idea and agreed to support the show.
And the one thing that I've learned is through this process is the only thing that people love more than playing pickleball is talking about pickleball.
You can watch the premiere of How I Met My Partner and perhaps have an opportunity to be part of the series at the C Film Center in Denver this Thursday at 1 p.m. Other SeriesFest events include a weekend showing of a pilot from local comedian Joshua Emerson called Bad Indian. Find out more about the festival at the link in our show notes.
Reporting for today's show also came from CPR's Lauren Antonoff Hart and Ryan Warner. Colorado Today is supported by listeners like you. Thank you for your support of independent local news. Be sure to follow Colorado Today in your podcast app, and if you hear a story or an episode you find helpful, share it. I'm Bazi Kanani.
And I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Going on a trip soon? Safeway pharmacists can help no matter where you're headed with travel vaccines, medications, and over-the-counter items. Schedule your consultation at safeway.com/pharmacy.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.